So now let me introduce our wonderful panellists. We've got Hannah Barrett from the Plunkett Foundation, an organisation who leads Power to Change's More Than a Pub programme, which provides business support to community pubs. We've got Ian Chambers from The Bevy in Brighton, and Rebecca McIntyre, Beck, at the Anglers Rest in Bamford in Derbyshire. So welcome all of you.
Thank you.
Welcome. We're going to start by talking to you, Hannah, to tell us more about the Plunkett Foundation, to tell us more about community pubs, and to give us an overview of the sector.
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much for asking me to be part of the session today. So I'm the Senior Project Manager here at Plunkett. Plunkett is a 100-year-old support organisation that helps predominantly rural communities to set up and save amenities through community ownership. So we can help communities to save their pubs, like obviously the people here today, but also to help with shops, farms, woodlands, cafes, bookshops, kind of whatever business the community might like to save. It's worth giving Plunkett a call, and we will help wherever we can. The important thing about the community businesses we support is that they are saving not only an asset for the future, but also helping their community to overcome issues they may face. So that could be isolation or loneliness, perhaps helping to improve people's well-being or provide job opportunities or volunteering. So Plunkett Foundation runs a survey every year of the community pub sector, and we are currently just getting our data for this year's. But to kind of give you a recap of the whole sector and what's going on, there are 122 community pubs out there trading at the moment. Obviously, at the moment, not all of them have got their doors open due to COVID, but the vast majority of them have. And in England, there's 110 community pubs. In Wales, there are 9, and in Scotland, there are 3. The latest to open was the Never Say Die in Jaywick in Essex. And they opened on the 1st of August. So it's fantastic, and I highly recommend having a look at their Facebook page. They've got a fantastic little video of them opening, and the cheers and the kind of elation from their community is brilliant to hear. And the latest into community ownership, so they've actually purchased the asset, was the White Horse in Blaydon in Oxfordshire. And I kind of wanted to highlight those two very different groups because one's a leased pub, one's a purchase pub, but also the Jaywick is in the most deprived ward in England. It's IMD score level 1, and it's urban, whereas the Blaydon pub is in a very rural, affluent area. And so community pubs are a business model for any type of community, and they really kind of demonstrate it. So it's worth having a look at both of those models. The sector is really growing, which is exciting for us, for Power to Change. We've had over 800 inquiries on the More Than a Pub programme, and we think around 1 in 13 will then go on to trading. So that's fantastic. We want to hear from more and more groups. There in 2018, 11 new community pub groups opened. Community pubs started trading. Sorry, in 2019, that was 18. And so far we've had 4 new community pubs open this year. But obviously, again, due to COVID, groups have been delaying their openings, waiting for the situation to kind of settle, doing additional renovation work. So we know there are a number in the pipeline that are likely to open by the end of the year. And what's exciting about this model is that it's a very resilient model. So again, through Plunkett's Better Business reports, we look at the sector and we know that there are pubs trading that are nearly 40 years old, which is fantastic. And we also know that the long-term success rate is 100% at the moment. And we give a little caveat to that. That means that any pub that has been purchased by the community is still being run as a pub. A few have gone into community ownership and then they've gone into private hands. And unfortunately, we have had our first pub this year close, which is the Wheel at Pennington. And partly that was because of COVID-19. So we know it's going to be a really difficult time for community businesses, and no matter what model they are. But Plunkett's here, Power to Change is here, so pick up the phone and contact us and make sure that you get in touch if you are a trading pub group and need our support as well. So kind of more about kind of what the pubs are feeling today is that there is concerns about trading, and it'll be interesting to hear from both Bex and Ian as to how they're finding things. Should they open now? Should they wait? We're encouraging groups to look at their business plans again, think about financial forecasting. But again, under the More Than a Pub programme, we can help groups to do that. So whether you're a new start group or a trading group, it's the programme's here. The exciting news at the moment is that Long Parish have just successfully completed, or still going actually, their share offer. They've exceeded their target, which again, we kind of were worried about community shares going on in this time. Would communities step up and want to support them? Is there too much financial insecurity going on? They've succeeded, they've surpassed it, and we've got 2 more groups who are just about to launch their community share offers too. So again, it's an exciting time, things are coming back, groups are starting to get involved again. And I just kind of wanted to end my section on the fact that community pubs are extremely resilient. As you'll hear from Bex and Ian, community pubs change, they diversify, they develop with their community, they take on board ideas and they test them. And that's why they're such a resilient and fantastic model of business and have such brilliant success rates. You've got examples like the Ivy in London, the Ivy House, sorry, in London, who do community meetings, they do language lessons, they do comedy nights, dance and theatre groups. The Dog at Belthorn in Blackburn has a history society. It runs a cafe, a restaurant, a chat and craft cafe. So they provide for their community. And I think really during COVID, we've been able to see pubs demonstrate their resilience and their thoughtfulness to their community by changing what they're up to and providing food, takeaway services for those who are vulnerable, but also food banks, prescription services. So it's an exciting time for community businesses. And we hope that people will get in touch, because the More Than a Pub programme, which I'm absolutely delighted to be telling people, is going to be unpaused for new groups from Wednesday the 19th of August. So next Wednesday, we can officially start supporting new community pub groups. So please do get in touch via the Plunkett website, and we will do our utmost to help you and your group. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So it's going to be great now to a community pub for ourselves, and we'll look at the pub and see how it really puts community into a community pub. So let's take 3 minutes to look inside the Bevy in Brighton.
When we first started the Bevendine Down Park Run, we had loads of people from all over the country come. And what they do is they meet at the pub, first of all, kind of have a chat, probably have a wee, have a quick drink. Then they all wander up to the down, do their, I think it's a 5.2k run. And then they all walk down to the pub where they're able to have a healthy breakfast.
So it's a place where we can all get together afterwards, come together, meet, talk about the run, and just generally get to know each other and have a nice breakfast.
So the Bevy is a community-run pub, and as far as I'm aware, it's still the only one on a council estate in the UK. So we're quite unique in lots of different ways.
If you look at our pub sign over there, you'll see that it actually says More Than a Pub. So the people who started the Bevy built in almost into the DNA of the organisation that it has to be more than a pub.
So we have lots of community spaces. So we have a community kitchen. So we have people coming in and do cooking. So we have family cooking. We're just about to restart our dementia cafe.
Great pub. From what I see, obviously I'm really a drinker. I get involved with trying to help do bits in the pub, help the pub out, maintenance ways. But what I see, what they do, like we've got the Friday Friends, we used to have Root Spiral. It's good.
It's like an extended family. Ever since I started coming here, I've got on really well with all the people, the regulars, the staff. If you ever need anything, lifts anywhere or anything like that, there's always someone at hand to lend a hand.
So the interesting thing about the Bevy is that it started out with just local people wanting to open their own pub, and they raised some money, but that was never going to be enough money to restore the pub to what it was before and do the things that we want to do in the pub. So we needed to ask others to help us out, and that help came through. So we got a big grant from the social investment business, and we got a subsequent grant from Power to Change, which enabled us to get our minibus, which is a vital part of what the pub does, enabled us to finish off the garden, make the place welcoming for all types of people and families, make the place safe. create disabled access. All those things make this pub a pub for everybody, and we couldn't have done that without help from other people.
Wow, Ian, that is quite something. And it was mentioned there that the Bevy, you believe, is the only community pub in England in a council estate. How did you and the community pull together to take ownership of the pub?
Yeah, so the pub was actually closed down. So it was opened in the 30s as when the council estates were built. They're very nice kind of garden estates with mainly semi-detached houses right on the edge of the downs. So that downs that you saw in the run is about 300 yards from the pub. You'd never think it when you come to the pub, but they all troop up the road and then start running on into the South Downs National Park. And for a long time, it was a great community pub. Local people looking after each other, raising money, taking kids to the seaside, etc. And it kind of lost its way a bit, and eventually ended up as a sort of antisocial pub. And there was violence and kind of breaking the rules of the license, and eventually the local authority and the police closed the pub down. The only trouble was that was the last pub on the estate. There'd previously been about 4 or 5, I think, and they'd all been lost to the sort of general trend towards losing pubs because they're supposedly not financially viable. So the pub was closed, but because it was the last one, local people reacted and said, well, we want to save this one, give us a chance. And they said that to the new landlord, who luckily was a local trust that also was looking to have a community aspect to the building. It turned the top deck of the building into affordable flats. Unfortunately, they gutted the ground floor, so no bar, no cellar, no floor, no walls, no electrics, no plumbing. And pretty much all of the money we raised restored the pub and got us open again. That took 4.5 years. So lesson 1, you want to run your own pub, be prepared for the long haul, be prepared for hard work, be prepared for a lot of satisfaction, but a lot of hard work and commitment, and some bumps in the road. The pub opened in December 2014, and we'd kind of made an amazing job to get it open, but frankly, we're not really ready, undercapitalised, and had underestimated the previous toxic reputation of the pub to people on the estate. So it took us a bit of revamping, so we applied to Power to Change, and luckily they really grasped the importance of the pub being the last one on the estate, but also the potential. So even in that first year, we'd had some real wins in the community, and they could see that given the right circumstances, given the right backing, we had every intention of achieving even more than that. So we kind of eventually kind of got our act together a bit more. We applied for funding to learn to be better governors, if you like, of the pub. We'd kind of been so used to campaigning and focusing on opening that you then switch to a new mode. So in the campaigning fundraising stage, you're very much in a kind of come on everybody, rush through every problem. Whereas obviously once you move into business stage, you're talking more about management, about procedures, about rotas and staff development, things that are probably not quite as sexy as knocking on doors and saying, come on everybody, let's have a great pub. So it's a kind of change of emphasis, but it's important to be ready for that change of emphasis and to know that you have either the people who are on board have those skills, or you seek out. We deliberately sought out someone who is more attuned to fundraising in terms of grants, because we knew we'd need them probably on a continual basis, and a kind of financial person who kind of jigged us around a bit. We brought in a new accountant, etc. So it's a kind of change of mode, and that enabled us to kind of steady the business and then really move on to the more than side of things. So over sort of the period of about a year to 18 months, we ended up with 2 social lunches a week, one with an emphasis on togetherness and some learning and some activities, and then one on a Friday, which was same every week: food, bingo, raffle. Don't do anything else. Please don't make us listen to any talks or anything. We'd have 40, as many as sort of 40 on a weekly basis, mainly over 50s, and at Christmas, talking about 60 to 70 people coming in for their Christmas dinner, free, paid for by the group, raising money throughout the year. And that's received international recognition. The Friday Friends group has been seen in Malaysia, New Zealand. We have people ringing up asking about how all that works, because we often use that as part of our kind of promotion of what we do in the pub. But as said in the video, and as Hannah indicated before, we do adult education classes in conjunction with a local sixth form. We do free cooking classes for kids because they're popular, but also we know that makes a significant long-term difference to a family's food dynamic, where it's the child that changes the diet of the family, the parents, rather than the other way around. We'll do entertaining things, sort of like we've had a dance extravaganza day with flamenco in the garden and whatnot. We might do other educational things. We hooked up with the local university, and we do what's called Brains at the Bevy. So that's a 30-minute long talk by an academic, but they're not allowed to use any academic jargon. So it's kind of lay terms. 30-minute talk followed by a 30-minute Q&A. And we've had amazing kind of evenings. There was a professor who's, I think, had done TV stuff, and she did nighttime mammals in the garden, and had all this sort of night films of hedgehogs facing off with cats, facing off with foxes. It turns out that a hedgehog can beat a cat, a fox can beat a hedgehog, and a cat can beat the fox. So it's sort of like rock, paper, scissors, but with nighttime mammals. So the kind of world's your oyster when it's your pub. And I think not only is that entertaining and enriching for the community, but it's power. So the people who own the pub, and there's more than 800 people own the business. We don't actually own the building, we just own the business. They kind of set the tone. And if they want to have adult education classes, we'll go about trying to arrange those and find partners and find ways of doing it. If they want comedy, we'll try and arrange comedy. But it's very much up to the people who live in this area to decide the direction of the pub. They can join the committee. We have some rules about that, but they can join in. And we're always trying to listen. We do ongoing consultation. There have been times when we've realised we're not listening, and we realised why, and we changed our ways of doing things. But it's real power. We say no quite a lot to people like the council and the universities when they want to come in with their agenda. And we are very clear that we either do equal partnerships, or we don't do them just because you're going to give us some money or rent the room. And that's a sort of thing which I think has lifted this community and has got us to the point now where, and COVID showed it, where we became a pivotal organisation in Brighton, and particularly in Moulsecoomb and Beverdine, where we're located. The Bevy called, on the 18th of March, the Bevy called a general meeting of all the organisations within Moulsecoomb and Beverdine. And in 2 hours, we had pretty much planned our COVID response for the entire area. And we immediately started making hot meals. So there was no interruption. And within 10 days, we were making 400 meals a day for people. Free, paid for by the local school trust, because we all work together, and we all work often together, and we kind of trust each other. And that shows you just how important a community-owned pub can be in its community. You don't have to just be a pub. you can kind of decide what it means to be a pub, and it doesn't necessarily just mean an elbow on the bar and a meal on a Thursday night or whatever. You can kind of make it whatever you want to make it, and that's a powerful thing.
And that's a lot of wonderful things that you do. And you mentioned there's more than 800 people who own the pub. How do they own it? Can you explain?
So when we had our community share offer back in before the pub was reopened, our offer actually lasted for quite a long time, and we had a very low buy-in. So we kind of knew as an organisation, even right back at the beginning, that the chances of raising the required money, because we knew it would cost at least £200,000 to open the pub because everything had to be put back. We knew it was not only was it unlikely, it's almost not right to try and pull £200,000 out of a community that has the sort of wealth levels of Moulsecoomb and Bevendine. But by setting a low figure but getting everyone to join in and say this really is important to people, that even skint people were prepared to put £10 in and become a shareholder, it was an indication of the popularity of the idea, the likelihood of people coming in to use the pub, and that it was important to that the council should take notice that what was happening here was important to the local people, and it was a last chance to do this, because pubs don't really get built nowadays, to be honest. And we should be saving pubs before we start building new ones, quite frankly. So people could join in at a very low buy-in. Not everyone paid £10. There was five-figure investment made by someone locally who sort of wished it well. The average, I think, worked out about something like £50, but it meant that everyone could join in. And literally we had people sort of opening their purse and saying, you could see that they were saying, you will make this count, won't you? And that's a big responsibility, but it's also a big boost. It tells you that you weren't wrong, that even if people didn't want to use the pub, they wanted to have one for maybe the one time a year when they wanted to come in and not have to go off their own estate, out of their own neighbourhood, just to have a pint now and again. So people bought in. That built up what is, I think, the largest number of shareholders of any community pub in the country. It's a slightly double-edged sword in that also requires administration, and it means quite a big AGM when the time comes, because you have to have a certain percentage. But it was something that showed the passion of the estate for the idea.
That's wonderful. We are taking questions. Anyone who wants to ask a question, Hannah, Ian or Beck, please put it in the Q&A box. So let's bring in Beck now from the Anglers Rest in Bath. Beck Community Pub is in a totally different area to Ian's.
Yeah, I mean,
tell us more.
Yeah, it's really interesting though, because we are obviously in a completely different location. We're in a rural location. We're a small village compared to where the Bevy is located. But you know, a lot of the things that Ian has been saying, you know, you could almost cross out the Bevy and put the Anglers. And you know, I think the thing with community pubs is there isn't a one-size-fits-all model. You know, every single community pub will be different, but the process that you go through and the challenges that you face are often very similar. You know, when we started out 9 years ago, when the Anglers Rest closed, there was only a handful of other pubs that had done it. So we knew that there were some examples of communities that had bought pubs, but we were kind of really at the forefront of kind of testing what was possible. The Anglers was one of the last 3 pubs. So again, we had a number of pubs over the years. They each closed down. The Anglers was the last one. And when it closed, you know, a public meeting was called. A group of people got together and said, you know, if we lose our last pub, you know, the village becomes a dormitory village. What do? You know, there's nowhere to socialise, there's nowhere to meet. You basically just sleep here and then go to work. And, you know, that's how a village dies. So a group of people got together, they called a public meeting. We were very lucky in Bamford that we already have some infrastructure. So we have a village hall, so there was somewhere to meet. And that sort of thing, you know, is really important for helping a project get started. There was a little bit of kind of infrastructure there that enabled, you know, a group of people to get together and have a discussion. From that, a kind of steering group got together, and again, we spent about 2 years then developing plans, campaigning. You know, it's not easy. There's a lot of challenges that you'll face along the road. For us, one of the challenges was that the pub was still actually, you know, an active pub. So although the tenants had left, it was still available on the open market for other tenants to come in. So during the course of our campaign, we had 2 new tenants come and try and make a go of it. And at that point, you know, you're faced with a really tricky decision of, do you pull back? Do you say, you know, well, okay, somebody wants to make a go of it, let them try. You know, who are we? We've never run pubs before. Who are we to say that we can do it any better? So I think the first time we kind of put our campaigning on hold. But what happens with tenancies nowadays is that you generally get a 6 month or a 6 month either no rent or very low rent. And then when the reality of paying full rent kicks in for the tenant, they soon realise that it's not a viable business. The Anglers itself is a huge building. You know, COVID actually, from our perspective, you know, we're in a reasonably good position because, you know, we can implement one-way systems, we can put in, you know, social distancing and what have you, because it's a huge building. But for a single tenant to run that building on their own is virtually impossible. You know, so what we were seeing was half the building in darkness, curtains closed, very uninviting. So that's not a way to attract people in. So in the end, when the second tenant came in, we decided actually we just need to carry on and keep campaigning and keep the momentum going. They also then realised that the venture wasn't viable for them. They left, and at that point we'd raised the funds. We'd raised £250,000 from 250 shareholders, most of which live locally. We also have 8 organisations that have invested. So our parish council, various other organisations have invested. The PTFA have bought a share. So you know, we'd got the finance in place. During the course of our campaign, the post office in the village also came under threat. So the idea was to bring that into the mix. So as I said, we've got a massive building. So we have a pub at one end, sandwiched in the middle is the post office, and then at the other end, we've now got a daytime cafe. We'd won the post office contract, we'd raised the funds, we'd registered the building as an asset, and the owners of the building sold the Anglers to a property developer. So at that point, we put, you know, raising money, campaigning on hold, and then we're now on the back foot and we're campaigning to actually save the project. And that kind of sparked the whole process of, you know, people writing letters, emailing, tweeting, Facebooking. I think the owners of the building actually had to close down their Twitter feed at one point because it just was so overwhelmed with people objecting to what they've done. And I think, you know, having gone through all of that process and kind of brought the community together and galvanized people and kind of taken them on this journey of what is possible, to then have it all taken away, you know, people were angry, people felt cheated, and that really kind of spurred them into doing something and taking action. Eventually our MP got involved, and he said he got involved purely because of the sheer variety of ways that people were contacting him, you know, letters, emails, phone calls, people trying to set up meetings with him. It wasn't just a kind of an identikit petition that somebody had signed that, you know, took 2 seconds. Everyone was kind of doing it in their own way. And that kind of made him realise the strength of feeling. And that basically his intervention led to the owners backing out of the sale and selling it to the community. And exactly as Ian says, then we realised that the hard work really began. You know, campaigning to buy it is great and you've got a vision, but actually once you get down to it, you know, there's 350 different visions of what a cafe should be or what a pub should be, or, you know, what you should offer. And the beauty of it is that we do own it. So those 350 people all get a say in what we do. They all have the absolute right to come to us with ideas and develop ideas themselves. And I think the things that have really flown are the things where somebody's come along and said, I want to do this. And we've said, great, get on with it. You know, so we have vinyl night. You can see in the background the posters for all of our vinyl nights. and that's run by a guy who's just passionate about records. He sets the theme, people come along, sit, chat, have a beer, you know, listen to vinyl, chat about what that means to them, and that brings together, you know, different ages, different backgrounds, different musical tastes. Sometimes we have things like Manchester versus Sheffield night, which always sparks quite a lot of debate and friendly rivalry. And then, you know, things like folk night, again, people come along, bring their instruments. Personally, that's not my cup of tea, but, you know, it's what other people want to do, and that's great that they feel like they can use the pub in whatever way they want. You know, we've got a group of older people that come and do knitting and crafting. They do that in the cafe side. They probably wouldn't come into the pub side, but because we've offered a cafe during the daytime, you know, that's what they need. And I think the really interesting thing about community pubs and community businesses generally is that, you know, management consultants will say to you when you're setting up a business, you know, find a niche, you need to find your niche. Actually, you don't with a community business. Your niche is your community, you know, and then you need to be all things to all people. You need to offer something for everybody, and you need to draw everybody in, because what we've realised from the 2 years of campaigning is that, you know, the anglers wouldn't survive if it only attracted a certain group of the village. It needs to attract everybody, and it needs to involve everybody. And I think that's one of the beauties of community business.
I'm going to take some questions now that have been sent in to us. So with Ian with 800 odd people, and Beck, you with 300 odd, the question is, with so many people owning the pub, how do decisions get made?
Yeah, so I mean, from our perspective, you know, anyone can stand to join the committee. We have an AGM each year, and people can put themselves forward to join. And effectively, the strategic direction of the business is set by the committee, and then we delegate the kind of day-to-day operations to our manager. So we were very clear at the outset that you know, this wouldn't be run by volunteers. It would be run by a professional team with hospitality experience. None of us have run pubs before. None of us wanted to kind of be behind the bar, pulling a pint or selling a stamp or, you know, pouring coffee. And sure, you know, we've stepped in to help out when needed, but we very much delegate to our brilliant staff team. But, you know, if somebody has an idea for an activity that they want to run, they come and have a chat with Sarah. You know, she's always around. She's very well known in the community, and you know, we'll be as supportive as we possibly can. We've got volunteers that do gardening, you know, volunteers that do maintenance, odd jobs and things like that. Basically, if you've got an idea, then have a chat.
Yeah, we've got some rules that we've put in place. I think one time when we realised that Sam, who was standing at the bar, was quite keen to join the committee meeting and join the committee, having had 3 or 4 pints, we realised that our constitution didn't actually prevent him sort of putting himself forward, and we had to sort of consider the idea that actually you can't just walk in and tell us how to run the pub. So we've got some sort of protocols that we have. We have if whatever size the committee is, we have a rule that we would prefer 70% of the committee to live on the estate, but it must have 50% of the committee who actually live on the estate. We also say that that if you do want to join the committee, you have to have volunteered in some way for the pub, preferably for 6 months. So it's very easy to have an opinion about running a pub. It's pretty different when you realise the extent of the work that the volunteer committee does. I've been a committee member on the pub, and yeah, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of responsibility. It's not all plain sailing. You can come in for quite personal criticism, and you know, it can be a bit hurtful when you think, well, I do all this work for free, and now you're saying I didn't do this and I didn't do that. Comes with the territory. Communities are not happy clappy, you know, happy families. That would be weird. Bit sort of Stepford Wives. you've got different people with different opinions, and the job, I think, of both the organisation as a whole and the committee is to have structures in place and a way of being and a way of operating that is mindful and allows people to enter the process. And we have an AGM and people can come and pose questions and stand themselves if they've fulfilled the requirements. But also we're quite clear that there are certain decisions that's how a community benefit society is run. These people are sort of the equivalent of a board, and you can hold them to account, but you also have to allow them to do their work. And so while it's a two-way process, you have structures that allow you to say, for the next 6 months or the next year, these are our policies, these are our rules of the pub, and we have barred people who have broken those rules. So again, I would say that I would definitely say it's really hard work, and at times can be quite onerous to be on the committee of a community pub. It's extremely satisfying to be part of a team that allows such great things to happen in the community, and for you to sort of literally have it happening in front of you, that someone's enjoying a family day, or you're addressing their isolation, and they're literally telling you, you've made my life better. So there's an immense amount of satisfaction, and equally on the sort of bigger community issues around the power that people have or don't have in their community. It's very satisfying to realise that you've created something which unusually, as it turns out, a pub is a way of sort of showing what your community is worth and what it can achieve, and that you can speak to people who perhaps, and certainly in terms of our community, I've often been run down and are regarded as this community of deprivation and stuff like that. Whereas whenever we speak in that way, and sometimes funders have a tendency to force you to say how many problems you have, our punters and our locals will come back to you and say, you must present us in a positive light. This is a great place to live, and we have lots of capacity and the pub is an expression of that capacity. As I said, in COVID, the reaction in Moulscombe and Bevendine was one of competence and togetherness and solidarity, not one of panic, and not one of what's happening to us, because we'd already shown that we knew how to answer our own needs and address challenges within the community, both positive and negative. So yeah, I would encourage people to, when we say more than a pub, we really mean more. We don't mean the odd bingo night, even those things are great. We mean real expression of, we own this, we decide about this, and we can show you just what we're made of. And we've changed a lot of people's minds about Moulscombe and Bevendine by what we've done.
Wonderful. And over to you, Hannah.
Yeah, just on a really kind of practical note, obviously Plunkett as a support organisation actually helps communities to set up their legal structures, so to put in place the community benefit society like the Bevy. And we also have model rules, so that just kind of gives you that guidance that you can refer back to, that says things like your committee will be up to 12 members, and that kind of helps. You don't want too many people on the committee and you get too many voices, but too few and you'll have too much to do each person. And so we've also got advisors who would come out and help you get to grips with those legal structures and put those governance and procedures in place. So there's a lot of support available to help you really embed and create a strong structure. And obviously it will change over time, and committee members will need training up as they come and go from the panel as well. But yeah, just really practical point there.
That's fantastic, because there are quite a few questions, Hannah, on where do people need to go when they would like to set up a community pub. So would that be they approach you at the Plunkett Foundation and
yeah,
all of those things like the legal structures? And
absolutely. So you can call us. I've popped the telephone number, I think, in the comments section. You can contact us via email, which is info@plunkett.co.uk. There's an inquiry form on our webpage, and we will do our utmost to respond really quickly to you. And it's myself and my colleague Di who lead the More Than a Pub programme, so you'll be speaking to one of us most likely. So yeah, just get in touch and we'd love to hear from you.
I mean, I get asked quite often about, you know, because we're quite well known at the Bevy, and we even get national questions. And usually the very first thing I'd just say to someone who asks about, oh, how do you start a community pub is, well, have you talked to Plunkett yet? Because that's the best thing to say first. Because if they have, they usually have other questions need answering. If they haven't, you need to answer those questions first before you can talk about more than this and more than that. Is literally, how do you gather together in a room and make a start? And usually the best thing is, well, call Plunkett first, like in your first week almost, and then they'll show you some of the things that probably you shouldn't start with, and certainly some of the things you must start with, so you'll start off in the right direction. I actually started a community benefit society to buy a local village hall, and we spent ages and ages trying to figure out how to do it until they said, well, have you thought about doing it under the Plunkett Constitution? It's like, oh yeah. Wish someone had told us that right at the beginning.
I think that's the beauty of doing it now. You know, there's so many people that have done it, and there's so much experience out there, and there's so many different models and different ways of doing it, you know, whether it's volunteer run or whether it's tenanted or whether it's managed or whatever. You know, when we were doing it 9 years ago, there wasn't necessarily that diversity, and there certainly wasn't, you know, the funders with, you know, the power to change with the sort of the grant offers that they have nowadays. And there wasn't, you know, I don't think there was the knowledge particularly in you know, across the sector. So trying to do it now, there's so much in terms of resources and support out there that you can get. It's you know, you don't need to make the mistakes that we made. You know, people have been through it, so you don't have to.
Excellent. And with all the figures you've put about how much it costs to have the pub, Beck, I think yours was 250,000, and Ian, was it 263,000? And somebody has asked, and I'm going to ask this to you, Hannah, how much does a pub cost? How much do we need to raise? And how do you do that if people around you don't have the money, like at the Bevy?
Okay, so cost of the pubs varies massively depending obviously where you are within the UK. And if you're going for a lease model or whether you're going for purchase. So some pubs kind of raised £20,000 and got in on a lease. Others have had to raise kind of nearly £1 million to secure their pub and own it. So it really depends on your local area. In terms of raising finance, through the More Than a Pub programme, we asked the groups to report back how much they've raised, and across 52 groups that we've worked with so far, the average share offer has raised £225,000. But that massively varies. So you've obviously, you know, got groups that have raised 21,000, I think was the least, up to 398 was the highest. So it depends on the community, and it was really good to hear that Ian kind of telling you to say, look at your community, do what's right for your community, set your share level at the right amount so that you get the most people involved. Because that's what's really, really key, is getting those people in as members so they come back as customers. So don't set the share level too high. That's really, really key. I'm sorry, what was the other question, Veronica?
And I'm just thinking as well, how otherwise do they raise the money as well? So you've got the shareholders, and so you've answered how much they need to raise as well. And how do you do that if people around you don't have the money, like the Bevy, and you've explained, they can pay what they'd like to pay. But yeah, where else can they get funding from?
Yeah, well, good news again with the reopening of the More Than a Pub programme. We will have the grant and loan packages available, which are £50,000 grant, £50,000 loan. There's only a very small number of those available, and they will go very, very quickly because we've got a high amount of interest in them. But groups have also turned to other local grant programmes, other trusts, and they've also taken out loans from, there's a lot of sector loan providers who understand what a community benefit society is and will work with you to put a loan package in place. Some go to commercial mortgage providers as well, and a small amount will kind of do fundraising locally, donations and stuff. So it's a whole suite of kind of financial measures that will be required to purchase. But again, Plunkett have got resources and advisors that will be able to help you think about your financial package and what you need.
That's fantastic.
And I think it's worth saying as well that there are models. So the Bevy as a model, we don't pay any dividends at all. So we've got that in our constitution, and that has helped us with certain grant seeking, that we will never pay out a dividend. So if you're putting money into the Bevy, you're investing it and it stays there. It can be returned, but there's no return on interest. But there are models that pay up to 5% interest on the investment. That's considerably better than having your money sitting in a bank account. And so some people, and there can be a tax benefit to making that investment as well, have decided that it's actually better to have the money invested in their local pub. And so they might put even five-figure sums into those investments. I think the max is 20,000, is it? I think in terms of tax benefit, and how much you can put into as a percentage of the total. But sometimes it's a great investment. They don't go back.
The Bell at Bath have been paying back on their shares pretty much since day one. They're an exceptional group in terms of the finances they've got behind them. But they purchased a affluent business, so they were very lucky that they've always had a good level of income. But they're probably but I think they're the strongest one I've heard.
And then in terms of the Bevy, sorry, obviously we were making it quite clear from the outset that we were not just intending to reopen the bar and be a bar. That we were definitely not what it was going to be before, which was an unloved and antisocial pub. But we were making it clear that this would happen and this would happen and this would happen. And that is what got the grant investment that we needed. So it was a social investment business grant that kind of recognised that if we achieved what we achieved, that was worth their investment, even though it was quite considerable. So you have to make a good case, and our case came from listening to and consulting a lot of door knocking before we actually said, so this is what the pub will be when it opens.
That's fantastic. We've got a few minutes left. Beck, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, again, just thinking about, different communities and the creativity that's out there and the different types of models and things, there's all sorts of different ways of doing it where actually it doesn't have to cost a lot. So, the Hurst Farm Social Club in Matlock, are going through a process of a community asset transfer at the moment with their local authority. So it's a local authority owned building that they're taking on, and it's an asset transfer. So it's not actually going to cost them to actually, own a building at the end of it. It's, so I think thinking about it creatively and thinking about how you can raise the funds or how you can do it, for very little. Is there a space in a community centre or a community hall or, that you can set up to kind of test the model, test demand? I think one of the things that we did very early on when the pub was closed was, have a day when we could do tea and coffee and cakes, just to test whether people would actually come to a cafe in the pub rather than a pub in the pub. There's loads of stuff that you could do. And I think talking to other pubs that have done it, talking to other groups that have done it, and looking at all of the different kind of levels of creativity that's out there, there'll be something that's right for your community.
That's wonderful. And there's a question here for you, Beck. You said at the start, did you ever consider working with the sitting tenants to diversify the pub and make it a viable business?
Yeah, we definitely we considered that, and actually there was a time where we discussed whether we would go down the tenancy route, whether we would take one of the tenants on as a kind of in that relationship. But I think there were various reasons why we wanted to go down the managed route. We wanted control of the business. So I think if you go down a tenanted route, you lose a certain amount of control over what goes on. You're basically you become a landlord essentially, and you're basically handing control of the business over to somebody else who can run it as they want. We didn't want it to become, a gastro pub. We didn't want it to become, something that wasn't welcoming and affordable for everybody. So we were very clear that was kind of the route that we wanted to take. We wanted to go down the managed route, and we wanted to kind of keep that control. And I think actually, the spread and the diversity of what goes on in this building, the post office, the pub, the cafe, we're open from 9 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, 7 days a week.
Exhausting.
There's no way that a single tenant could take that on and run it themselves. During COVID, we responded and set up a shop because, the shop had closed down at the beginning of the year in the village, so we were able to respond really quickly. We probably wouldn't have been able to do that if there was a tenant in place. You know, we kept the post office running during COVID, despite that, you know, being a loss to the business, because people said to us, you know, where do I buy my electricity top-up cards, you know, for my meter if the post office isn't open? How do I pay my bills when I don't have internet banking if the post office isn't open? So we kept the post office open. Again, you know, a commercial tenant wouldn't do that because they just wouldn't make that decision to lose money in order to support their community. So I think, yeah, it was an option, but it wasn't the right option for us in the end.
And I've got leads on back to a question. How do you convert local enthusiasm for the campaign when you're campaigning to save a threatened pub? And how do you convert that to put hands on work that's needed to run the pub?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you need to find out what people are enthusiastic about. What skills have you got in your community? You know, people like to be asked to do things. It's quite a flattering thing, actually, to be asked to help out. So I think, you know, having those conversations and drawing people in is the way that you do it. You know, when we've needed specific areas of support, so again, we needed help with accountancy, you know, a local person stepped up and said, yeah, you know, I'm a qualified accountant, I'll help you out, you know, as a volunteer. We've got somebody with IT skills that comes in and helps us out with the website, helps us out with the kind of the cabling and all the infrastructure in the pub. We've got a group of 4 blokes who come in and do odd jobs. You know, they enjoy it. It's a social opportunity for them. They come, they have a cup of tea, a piece of cake, and then they do, you know, the odd jobs around the building that Sarah keeps a list for them, and they tick it off as they go along. You know, we have a group that maintains the garden, does the gardening for us. And again, it's a social opportunity. It's an opportunity to be outdoors, get healthy. You know, you need to find what motivates people and kind of offer them the opportunities to draw them in, I guess.
Mm. That's wonderful. And then sorry, Hannah, did you want to say something?
Worth kind of mentioning that there are various different models of running a pub. So it's about a 50-50 split in terms of groups that have employed a manager directly and then staff teams, and those who've put a tenant in. And then the tenant obviously gets on with it and runs the business, and the community owns the asset or the business behind the scenes kind of thing. So there are those groups that have a huge number of volunteers and completely run it volunteer managed. And there's others, Beck, I think you said was it 17 part-time staff or something you said run yours?
Yeah.
So there's various different ways of running the pub, and it's working out what's best for your community. And whether you have those passionate individuals who can step up and volunteer and have got the time, or you need to employ a tenant and they're bringing a tenant, and that's equally fine. It's still a community business, and you'll still get to develop the business behind the scenes as a committee.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues for us was, you know, a lack of jobs locally, and particularly for young people. So actually offering those jobs and not kind of going down the volunteer route, but actually going down the route of paying people to do jobs and paying people to maybe have their first experience of employment. That was a really important thing for us. So yeah, we have a staff team of about 17, which Sarah manages very well.
But being able to say yes is quite good. So often we get asked the most bizarre requests, and I think they're all expecting us to say, no, that's bizarre, that'll never work. So, but we do them because because we can, but 2, we've learned to know that we might not be right about our own kind of skepticism about something. So we did a foraging the streets and they ended up making shampoo out of dandelions and old beer. And we were like, no one is going to do that. And it was really, really popular, and kind of kicked us off into doing kind of pocket science, kind of weird science kind of days that we do regularly. Always really popular. The guy who runs them is fantastic. And then there is a thing of just, you allow someone to do something and they end up taking all of the work on. We do that often now. It's almost our model. Is if someone says, do you want to do it? We say, that sounds great, but you have to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
And then they either have to do it or not, you know.
It's time to wrap up now. So in one sentence, Ian, can you give us the best tip for somebody who's thinking of taking on a community pub? One sentence, what would you advise them? And then
I'd say be prepared to work hard, but it's possibly going to be the most rewarding thing that you've ever done outside of your own family achievements and things like that. Better than your job, better than your career, everything. It can change your life.
Beck.
Completely echo that. You know, I'm self-employed. I don't work in a team, but this is the best team that I've ever been in. You know, I've met so many people and done so many cool things. But I think the other thing to add is there's so much support and advice and expertise and experience out there. You know, you don't have to struggle. You don't have to make mistakes. Get advice. Go and visit people. Our door is always open. Come and have a beer with us. Come and have a cup of tea with us. Quite happy to talk about all of it, share stuff with you, and I know lots of other community pubs are as well.
That's wonderful, thank you. And Hannah, to you, what advice would you give them?
I think it's speak to your community, find out what they want and how they want the vision of the pub to be. As kind of Beck and Ian have said, their pubs are so much more than a place just to bet a pint. Don't think about what the pub used to be, think about what it can be for the community, and consult the community and engage them in what you're doing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much all, and I apologise that we didn't get through all the questions. So thank you Hannah, Ian and Beck for speaking to us, and to everyone who's joined the session. It will be available to watch again on Power to Change's social media channels and website. If you want to know more about community pubs, get involved with discussions about them, you can head over to social media and find the Community Owned Pubs Facebook page. And before we go, if you'd like to hear first-hand stories of how people just like you are helping to change their communities for the better, and to also hear Beck and the Anglers' story in more depth, please listen to and subscribe to Power to Change's new podcast called Then One Day. Now, The Anglers is the first episode, and it's a wonderful episode. It was released earlier this week. Find it on your phone's podcast app. So thank you again for joining the session. And thank you so much to Power to Change for this first ever virtual community business festival. We hope you've all been really inspired and also found solutions to your community business challenges. And we hope you found other community businesses to connect with. So once again, Hannah, Ian and Rebecca, thank you very much. And to all the speakers who've joined us over the past couple of days, thank you very much also. And to the Power to Change team, thank you for a wonderful 2 days, and for all your work in putting all of this community business festival together. So have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.